Monday morning, Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Stephanie White is running practice with 5 healthy front-court bodies, 2 of them on injury watch, and 48 hours until tip-off. She told reporters she's evaluating day-to-day. What she didn't tell them is the thing every coach in this league already knows. Herb Simon's front office handed her the same broken rotation that ended last season, and the season starts Saturday. Stephanie White is the head coach of the Indiana Fever, a former WNBA Coach of the Year who built the Connecticut Sun into a contender before coming home to Indianapolis. She's the woman Caitlin Clark plays for. She's the one running point on a championship window that opens this weekend. And right now, 2 days before her team takes the floor, she's working a practice gym with a roster that just paid Aliyah Boston $6.3 million over 4 years and Kelsey Mitchell $1.4 million in a single year, and still doesn't have a healthy front-court rotation. Lauren Billings, out with an ankle from the Nigeria exhibition Saturday, Lexie Hull, hamstring, Bree Pissott, leg, Aliyah Boston, just back from her unrivaled injury, and not 100% in either direction. Caitlin Clark is healthy. That's the only reason Saturday's opener happens at all. And here's the part that should make every Fever fan nervous: the math of how this happened. Stephanie White said it herself at Media Day, on the record. 60% of this team's salary cap is going to 3 players. 3, in a league with a 12-deep roster. Caitlin Clark, Aliyah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell. That's where the money is. Boston signed a 4-year, $6.3 million extension on April 17th, the largest total contract in WNBA history. Mitchell on a 1-year, $1.4 million Supermax, 20% of the team's cap on a single year. Sophie Cunningham at $665,000. Lauren Billings on a 2-year, $1.6 million deal. Add it up. The math isn't subtle. The cap is spent at the top, and what was left was supposed to build the bench. What was left didn't build anything. White's exact phrase to reporters Monday: the team is evaluating day to day. That's coach speak. That's the language of a head coach who's been told she has to make a decision before tip-off and doesn't have enough information to make it. Day to day on Billings, day to day on Hull, day-to-day on Pissott, 3 players, 3 injury reports, and a front office that didn't sign anyone behind them. Here's what the front office is saying about it. At Media Day, Fever GM Amber Cox told reporters Indiana is making, quote, decisions impacting what we need to do against a hard cap in the future. That's the quote. The GM is talking about future cap flexibility. The head coach is running practice with a 48-hour clock. The roster cuts deadline isn't some procedural thing. It's the moment Stephanie White has to look at her bench and decide who she's keeping and who she's losing, knowing that whoever's left has to play through May, June, and July with no reinforcements coming. Because Herb Simon's front office didn't bring any. Last season, the same front office sent Stephanie White into the playoffs with a thin front court. Boston was carrying the paint alone. Mitchell and Clark were running themselves into the ground in the backcourt. The bench was a turnstile. That season ended the way thin teams end. The diagnosis was supposed to be simple: sign depth, use the cap flexibility, bring in 2 reliable bigs and a wing who can defend. What happened instead? Boston got the max extension, Mitchell got the Supermax, Cunningham came back at $665,000. Billings landed on a small 2-year. Hines, Allen, and Harris signed 1 years on the cheap. That's the move. That's the entire move. The front office locked in the 3 players who were already overworked and added pieces around the edges. Stephanie White is being asked to coach the same team that broke down a year ago, and to win this time. Caitlin Clark is healthy. That's the headline going into Saturday. 24 years old, fully recovered, ready to open her 3rd WNBA season. The Supermax conversation starts in 2027. She becomes eligible for the largest contract in this league's history exactly 12 months from now. What does that Supermax buy? It buys Caitlin Clark for 4 more years on a roster that doesn't have a front court behind Aliyah Boston. The bench is already 2 injuries deep before opening night. The championship window closes when her body stops carrying it. Stephanie White knows that. The whole league knows that. Herb Simon, the man who controls the Fever's checkbook, knows that. And his front office decided that Mitchell at $1.4 million was the priority, not the players who keep Caitlin Clark from running into the ground. Watch what happens if this team starts 0-3. The conversation isn't going to be about the cap. The conversation is going to be about Stephanie White. That's how this works. Front offices don't get fired in May, coaches do. White inherited this roster. She didn't build it, she didn't sign it, she didn't choose to spend 60% of the cap on 3 players and leave the bench bare. But she's the one running practice on Monday. She's the one giving the day-to-day quotes. She's the one whose face is in front of the cameras when the losses start. The front office didn't just hand her a thin roster. They handed her a job that's harder to keep than it should be. And they did it in a year when every loss is going to get magnified through a Caitlin Clark camera lens. Longtime Fever fans will remember something about Stephanie White that the cameras don't always pick up. She didn't arrive in Indianapolis as a coach, she arrived as a player. December 15, 1999, Kelly Krauskopf, brand new Fever GM, made her first ever transaction. She picked Sandy Brondello in the expansion draft and immediately traded her to the Miami Sol for the rights to a guard named Stephanie White. White spent years on the Fever as a player. She came back as an assistant. She's now the head coach. 26 years after Krauskopf brought her to this franchise, Krauskopf is back in the front office. The player she once acquired is now the coach who's about to take the fall for a roster Krauskopf's office didn't build. There's a word for that. The word isn't loyalty. 2 days from now, the Indiana Fever take the floor. Caitlin Clark gets the headline. Aliyah Boston gets the second-line story. Kelsey Mitchell starts the season she just got paid like a star to deliver. And Stephanie White stands on the sideline with a bench that's already 2 players short of what she was promised. If this team wins, the front office takes a victory lap. Herb Simon's box at Gainbridge fills up with the people who claim credit for the cap structure that kept the championship core together. If this team loses, even one game, even ugly, the same office that built the roster will let the conversation drift toward the coach. That's the position. That's why abandoned is the word. Not betrayed, not fired. Abandoned. Left in a job that was set up to fail by the people who had every dollar they needed to do it right. 3 injured players. 48 hours until tip-off. 60% of the cap locked into 3 names. A coach who arrived in this franchise as a Krauskopf trade and now stands at the front of a Krauskopf roster that's missing the pieces it needed. Saturday's opener isn't going to be about basketball. It's going to be about whether the woman holding the clipboard gets the support she needs from the man holding the checkbook. Herb Simon has until tip-off to put one more body on this bench. He won't. He never does. And when this season starts to slide, Stephanie White is going to be the name that takes the heat. The Fever better be paying attention, because the front office that built this roster isn't coming to defend her.